You may see all this recent negativity as a knee-jerk overreaction to something that really isn't that serious. It's not. It's serious. Boycott Nintendo. I want to make it very clear that the reasons I'm calling for this boycott have nothing to do with creative decisions that Nintendo have made or are making in their launch slate. This is all about business. And as a consumer of Nintendo products, I have every right to push back on ruthless business strategies. This is not about people who make games. This is about people who sell them. Nintendo absolutely deserves to be called out. And that's why I feel so confident saying boycott Nintendo. And I say that as a massive fan of Nintendo. The Super Nintendo was my first console. My top 10 games of all time would mostly be filled with Nintendo games. I have been really excited for the Switch 2, but now I've decided that I won't be getting one. Not because I think the games don't look good, because I don't think the company deserves my money. I say boycott Nintendo because I want them to change and be better, not because I want them to go out of business. I love Nintendo, boycott Nintendo. I'm going to go through some of the reasons for that now, but this is all information that I have as of today, the 5th of April. This is all subject to change, and if it does, I'll put something in a pinned comment. So here's what I have for now. It's not just about the pricing. Although that's definitely the straw that broke the camel's back, and we'll get to it soon, there is more to it than that. There's a lot of people repeating drop the price in those Nintendo live streams they're doing, but even if they did that, they still have a lot to answer for. The first thing I want to talk about is this thing about the physical game key cards. Some of the Switch 2 games you buy will not have the game data on there. The cartridges will be empty, with the exception of a code that will allow you to download the game. I should say from the outset, there's a lot of misinformation online about this. This isn't all games. This doesn't include any of the first-party games that we know of. I've seen this argument used as a reason why this isn't such a bad thing. No. If only a fraction of Switch 2 games did this, it's still a terrible thing. This isn't one games company coming out and saying their game doesn't fit on one particular cartridge. This is a feature that Nintendo has advertised. It's coming from them. If there are certain games coming to their platform that do not fit on their cartridges, they should be prioritizing better storage for their cartridges. But it's not a storage problem. Bravely Default is only 11 gigs. There's no reason why this data shouldn't be on the cartridge. None. My first thought with all of this was, holy shit, this is what Microsoft did with the Xbox One. No more pre-owned games, no more lending your games to your friends, and that's why they revealed those digital game cards. It's not a fun new feature, it's a replacement. I've seen some places report that these are not tied to your account and can be traded and used like physical cartridges, but I can't find anything from Nintendo directly. This is all still developing and I'll keep you updated, but regardless of whether these are tied to your console or not, it's really fucking annoying. If you're like me, you buy physical copies of games you're likely to play quite a bit from time to save up on taking space on your Switch. You can't do that anymore because the keycard doesn't allow you to download onto the card itself, but onto your Switch 2. The Nintendo website says this: please note, to download the game, you must have enough free space in your Nintendo Switch 2 system memory or micro SD express card. So, you must either have enough storage or re-download them every time a friend makes the offhanded suggestion, want to play Street Fighter. That's fucking stupid. That's one of the core reasons to buy physical media as opposed to digital, to save on digital storage space. It's much less convenient than buying digital because although it's still taking up storage on your Switch 2, the keycard needs to be inserted. Meaning if you wanted to switch from Street Fighter to Bravely Default, you need to swap the cartridges even though they're just empty plastic and the data is on the console itself. There is no reason for this. It doesn't make any sense. And it raises a lot of questions. If the game is patched in a way that you don't like, The original game that you may prefer is lost. You don't have the original physical media. The game is whatever Nintendo decides it should be, and what happens in the next console generation. What does your keycard do then? What happens when the Switch 2 eShop shuts down in the same way previous consoles have? These cartridges are less functional, have a much shorter half-life, and cost more money. Microsoft handled that Xbox One situation really badly. It lost them the console war that generation, and they've since struggled to recover. Phil Spencer has since said that it was a massive wake-up call for them and drove them to be more consumer-friendly. Nintendo is doing a very similar thing now, but the difference between the Xbox One and the Switch 2 is that the Switch 2 is a handheld system. So picture this. You're at the airport with your Switch 2, you decide that you're going to buy a duty-free game and play it on your 16-hour flight. Well, you better hope the airport Wi-Fi lets you download a 70 gig file before boarding, bucko, or you're not playing your brand new game that you just bought for $80. While we're on that, let's talk about the pricing. Nintendo hid all of this in the recent Direct for a very good reason. They knew it would make people angry. But all of the discussions I've seen about this have just focused on Mario Kart World. It's not just Mario Kart World. Pre-orders for most of the world are not available until next week, but in Australia, we're able to pre-order both the Switch 2 and select games right now from two of the biggest retailers, EB Games and JB Hi-Fi. The price that Mario Kart World is set at is shared by other launch games as well. Not big new first-party games, re-releases of much older games. Even when it's available for a fraction of that price on other platforms. But these are Australian prices. I don't know how it would work wherever you are, and this is all subject to change. People are talking a lot about the US prices and blaming the recent tariff situation, but look at the UK. £74.99 for Mario Kart World is $97 US. That's insane. The current tariff situation in America isn't the reason for this, but it could affect things very soon, because pre-orders have just been halted in the US due to some recent announcements by Trump, meaning it could be soon that American Nintendo fans will be looking to pay even more. Australian prices for games are really weird. Around the time of the Switch's release, a new game was priced at around 80 to 100 Australian dollars, which is about 50 to 60 USD. And that's the price that Switch games still sell for here. But in between that time, the other consoles have had a new generation, and in Australia, we saw a massive price increase. From 80 to $100 to around and above 120, which is about the price that people are so angry at currently with Nintendo. We've paid for that for all our non-Nintendo games for years now. We're suckers. In fact, unlike other countries, we have the privilege of paying less for Switch 2 games than current PS5 games. But even though it's less, it's still too much. Because these games never go down in price, and they very rarely go on sale, and when they do, it's not for a very significant discount. There is no buy now or wait for a sale question with Nintendo. It's buy at this price or don't. That's why the price difference is so difficult to swallow, even for Australia, where the price change is more in line with the competition. And before you say, but inflation, no fucking no. Because although prices were higher in the past when accounting for inflation, the old Nintendo was once much more consumer friendly. The Super Nintendo was my first console. Adjusting for inflation, it was sold for about $460 US. The Switch price, adjusted for inflation, was about $391 US, but that's not taking into account all of the other charges. The Super Nintendo came with 2 controllers. The Switch came with 2 Joy-Con controllers and 1 Joy-Con grip to combine them. The single Joy-Cons are pretty much useless, and the combined grip controller isn't great. So I'd say if you have a Switch, it's pretty likely that you either have a Pro controller or something like it. And that adds about $70, which puts it at the same price as the Super Nintendo. But that's not taking into account the monthly fee that is mandatory to get access to any and all online functionality. It also doesn't account for all the extra storage space you'll need to be buying, especially now that even your game cartridges don't have games on them. Gaming is much more of a lifestyle than ever before. There are so many more games than there were on those early consoles. So you are buying more games than people did back then and spending more time playing them. Even if the Switch 2 did come with 2 Pro controllers and online was free, it still wouldn't make sense to adjust pricing for one simple reason. It's not just about the price of the units, it's about units sold. The Super Nintendo sold for 49.1 million units worldwide. The Switch sold for 150.86 million units and is their highest selling console of all time. And that's not taking into account the large array of merchandise. Nintendo now has theme park deals. They have movie deals. In the last 25 years, since the year 2000, Nintendo has increased its market value by over 10 times. Don't you dare tell me, won't somebody please think of inflation? Nintendo is doing just fine. They're not going out of business if they continue selling at their current prices. They aren't covering their losses. They just want more money. And it should be obvious, but this ripples out. The problem is not whether you think these games on this hardware are worth this price, because everyone else is watching this. Do you think Sony and Microsoft are currently sitting back in their chairs thinking, wow, that's expensive, but we'd never do that, we're consumer friendly? No. They're waiting to see if it affects Nintendo's bottom line, and if it doesn't, they're pressing the big red $80 US button too, because they have no reason to if it doesn't stop you from reaching for your wallet. Sony and Microsoft do, however, a much better job selling stuff to us than Nintendo. Australian pricing aside. All of these game companies offer complimentary services to ease the sting of paying a monthly fee for online services. Yes, they are typically more expensive than Nintendo's online fee, but they offer so much more. Nintendo offers a selection of very, very old games. They offer some additional functionality and some services, but broadly speaking, they're pretty much direct ports, and it is a very limited selection. A fraction of their back catalogue with some very notable absences. Microsoft and Sony, however, offer free monthly games and access to a massive catalogue, hundreds of games long. Not just old games, new ones. Sometimes brand new ones. Animal Well was on here day one. Most games I play are on the PlayStation Plus library. Nintendo doesn't have an equivalent. To play Nintendo 64, Game Boy Advance, and now Gamecube games, you need to buy the upper tier, the expansion pack. The expansion pack also allows access to some additional features, such as access to the expansion passes to some modern first-party Nintendo games. But speaking now, at the end of the Switch lifecycle, that features only 3 games. There are a ton of other Nintendo games with very similar expansion passes, even Splatoon 3, but this feature is completely restricted to just these 3 games. If you don't have them, it's useless. There is no legitimate reason for this. This feature should include all first-party expansion passes. It makes no sense to only include these 3 games. It was announced with the Switch 2 that the expansion pack membership will allow you to upgrade both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom to the Nintendo Switch 2 editions at no additional cost. That's pretty neat, but it's only these 2 games. For Kirby and Mario Party, you still need to pay for the upgrade. There is no good reason the expansion pack shouldn't include all Nintendo Switch 2 upgrades. But even if they allowed that, it still wouldn't match what is offered by their competition. The selection of games on Nintendo Online and the expansion pack is woeful. They announced only 3 games playable for the Gamecube. That wouldn't be so hard to swallow if this wasn't the only legal way to play most of their back catalog, with the exception of having the old physical games in a console to play them on. Nintendo's back catalog is lost media. It's abandonware. And the reason is simple. Because they want to repackage it and sell it back to you as a remaster or as part of a collection. Nintendo puts so much of their focus on remastered games. Every direct they do is filled with them. But there's no way to buy or play the original games. So if you don't like the way they remaster them, tough. Often the remastered editions play worse than the original games, but you don't have the option to choose the original game as an alternative. You either pay modern prices or you don't get the game. It doesn't have to be this way, and there was a time, not that long ago, that it wasn't. I was pumping my fist in the air when Super Mario 3D All-Stars was announced, but then I realized that was only because I could finally play Galaxy again. It wasn't that it was a good product that was reasonably priced. It was that I could finally play a game I really liked, and it didn't matter that they were selling it to me for the price of a modern AAA game, because I had no alternative. Super Mario All-Stars for the Super Nintendo had more games and less time had passed since their original release. How does inflation explain this? Nintendo wasn't always like this. We used to have an eShop not that long ago where you could buy all these games individually and have them forever. Nintendo used to get a lot of flack for making people re-buy all their games every console generation, but at least back then, you could buy them. A big component of the Switch 2 launch slate is Metroid Prime 4. It is the sequel to the Prime trilogy, which you can't play. You can't play the games that lead directly into one of the big Switch 2 launch titles. First-timers won't know the context, and people who played these games over 20 years ago have no way of refreshing their memory. You just can't legally do that. Back on the Wii, Nintendo sold the Metroid Prime trilogy as one combined collection. They sold this one generation after the first 2 games and only 2 years after the last. The Prime trilogy not only included all the games in the trilogy, they featured remastered graphics, a new control scheme, and additional features. They sold this for $50 US, the same price as every other Wii game. For the next console generation, the Wii U, the Prime trilogy was sold for even less, $20 US. The Nintendo of today would never do that. One generation later, Mario 3D All-Stars featured games that were significantly older than the ones in the Prime trilogy, with less features, less functionality, and for more money. Boycott Nintendo. Yes, it sucks. Mario Kart World looks awesome. Donkey Kong 2. Dusk Bloods? That looks crazy. I would love to play that. But no, boycott Nintendo. I've got enough on my backlog that I don't need to fork out what they're asking. I've got games to play, and so do you. Yes, shiny and new is exciting, but sending a message is more important, because imagine a world where Nintendo offered what their competition did. Imagine a world where you could buy any game from the Nintendo catalog for a small price or pay a small monthly fee and get those games and many, many more. New games and 2 extra free games every month. That is the industry standard. Nintendo has decided that the industry standard is not for them. They've decided to offer us far less than that, and we've been kissing their feet saying thank you for far too long. No. Boycott Nintendo. If you really can't stand the FOMO, buy secondhand. That's assuming you're able to do that with this physical keycard situation, but don't put money directly in their pockets. Don't buy digitally from the eShop. Just don't. They need to get the message that they need to adjust their business practices and make consumers happy. They need to get that same wake-up call that Phil Spencer got all those years ago. Don't let them get away with it. If you were really in the market for a brand new handheld console, for God's sakes, buy a Steam Deck. If you really do want some of that Nintendo charm, you can get more of it on the Steam Deck than on the Switch 2. If you want access to Nintendo's back catalog, you fucking got it. The Steam Deck can do that. Not only all the consoles up to the Gamecube, Wii as well, the Nintendo DS, even the Switch. You can kit your Steam Deck with every single game in the Nintendo back catalog with a higher resolution and frame rate and added functionality, and you can do it for free. If you have bought those games before, you should be able to use an emulator to play them, especially if there is no other alternative. They're yours. If Nintendo hasn't given you a way to play the games that you have already paid for, find your own methods. I wish I could be excited to give Nintendo money to make more great games. I wish I could be excited for the future of the Switch 2. I'm not. I'm really, really angry, and I think you should be angry too. In a post-capitalist world, you have only one form of real power. Not your vote, not your voice, nothing you do matters more than who you decide to give your money to. So don't give it to them. Boycott Nintendo.